do this. What is going on, everybody? We are not ready yet, but it's been too long, so we are just gonna go ahead and go live. So this, for any of you guys who have only seen me on my channel, this is Brandon Robinson. He's one of not only my favorite football people to talk to, but one of my co-hosts on a podcast we have on the Windy City Gridiron podcasting channel, Rule of Three, which we're going to do a live recording of. And we're going to try to make this a habit. So not only are we going to do Rule of Three, but we're going to do Bear With Me, my post-game show on this channel live. And that's obviously going to look some, we're going to figure out what that's going to look and feel like, because chances are we're not going to be interacting much, for instance, during the actual, we're not going to be interacting a ton during the actual podcast with the chat, but we want to do some Q&A stuff afterwards. But either way, we're ready to feel this out with y'all if you are, and we're excited to put out some great stuff. Brendan, how are you feeling this evening?
Good, man. I appreciate it, and I'm excited to do this live. I've seen a lot of other people doing this. I know a lot of people like viewing this way, so I'm excited to see how this turns out.
I am too. I think it'll be really fun, not to mention, and I'm already seeing that I put the chat box behind too many things, so let me figure out where that is. Oh, we got some kind of an alert, and oh, we got a subscriber. Nice. Thank you so much for jumping in. Juice in the pocket, as it were. But I got to get this ahead of the Zoom call, because I don't know if you're watching, Brandon, but anytime anybody puts something in the chat, it is not coming up over things. But yeah, either way. Akusai, you know what? If you want me to do the Bear With Me logo over my face, I can. But so that's one of those, Brandon, I don't know if you know this, but like I remember when I was figuring out what I was going to do, because I was like a year into my job, and I was like, I can't do this forever. And so I was sitting at work playing with Photoshop, trying to figure out what my podcast logo would look like. And I just took a picture of Colin Cowherd and photoshopped a bear's face over it and went, this is kind of what I was thinking. And my wife laughs out loud and goes, that's it. That's perfect. It's exactly goofy enough. And so from there, that's just been what I've riding.
Is it still like that?
Yeah, you can go look up any Bear With Me episode.
I don't know why I haven't noticed
and
that.
It's I would put the picture up, but I haven't figured out a screen share for it. So let me. I got to change the donation goal. Here's visual color. So let's get some text of that. So you guys are really watching. You guys are watching it like true live. But yeah, so let's see. As far as what the chat's saying, hey, Adrian, the Dalton Fields comparison to Smith Mahomes, Brandon, we're going to get in there, I'm sure. But I agree with this guy. Like, it's not the same. Everybody talking like it's the same is getting a little bit old, in my opinion. But hey, maybe I'm just playing this old fashioned. Danny, how you doing?
Better now that I figured out the new computer.
You are really laggy. Did you know that?
Yeah, you're cutting out a little bit.
Well, we'll let Danny.
Awesome.
By the way, I don't know if you know this. We're already live, but we're all figuring it out together.
Well, we'll let
Let's see.
We are out here doing our best. Give me a second. I'm just gonna come into my my phone.
Go for it. Not to mention well, there you go. There he goes. But so, Curtis, that's a good call. At one point, I know I've used Discord before, but we're playing with it. So thanks for just hanging out at this point. I know, Adrian, exactly. So let's see. So, Shane, it's funny you talk about that. I know one thing we're going to talk about on the podcast. Brandon, if you were just going to spitball, right, based on what you think, do you think that Justin Fields, if he was thrown in, could figure it out? Or are you kind of in the position of, like, you don't really want to risk it? Like, he's going to learn plenty on the bench anyways, even though it might help the Bear. I don't know. Like, where's your head at regarding all this? Because we've obviously had, like, weeks to just sit on it and stew.
Right. I think he could figure it out. I think a lot of quarterbacks could figure it out. But I think when teams draft a quarterback, especially round one, everybody gets excited. They want to see him. They want to see the results. They want to see the fruits of their labor, of the trading 2 first-round picks to get him. So, like, I would love to see him, and I'm sure he would do decent. I just don't think it's necessarily the perfect situation for him, just because they have the worst offensive line in the NFL,
Recording
a really
in progress.
tough schedule, and I just like he could figure it out. I just think it's better safe than sorry. I think the Bears actually have a really good plan. It's just not necessarily coming out the right way, but it's an imperfect situation. They could never explain exactly what they're doing, and the fan base take it the right way. So it is what it is. But I'm happy with how they're going about it, actually.
Before we get to Danny's inevitable mic test, I do want to just say, Brandon, that is one of the things that, if I've learned anything, I think is just really complicated to get across, is this idea of, it's like, on one hand, I think Fields could figure it out, right? Like, whether it was a rough first week, a rough first 4 weeks, whatever it looked like, I think Fields is plenty good, and that he would be able to figure it out. I'm trying to find a synonym, but I can't. Like, that he would grow into a quarterback and could have that Justin Herbert-like season if he had to be Justin Herbert. On the other hand, I think that what Patrick Mahomes said about the time he had being invaluable as a rookie, I think that what we've learned from what Andrew Luck has said, what happened with Desean Watson, like, basically all rookies aren't ready yet. It's this complex, like, both and, right? Where is Fields good enough to play? Yes. Is he ready? Well, conventionally speaking, according to the rookie scale, probably. Is Fields automatically a top 12 quarterback? Maybe not yet, because he's a rookie. Like, will he learn a lot on the bench? Probably. Will he learn a lot in the games? Sure. But it's worth remembering that, what is it? You get 3 to 5 times the reps in practice that you do in games anyways. So even being the second quarterback gets him those scout team reps. And I don't know. I can't tell whether I'm talking myself into it or being realistic about what goes on in a football team. I feel like as long as Fields plays about half the season, he's going to get plenty of development, and the Bears hit their development target for 2022 or 2023. So there are things to be positive about, but I'm not about to pretend that I'm not feeling a little bit strained the longer and longer it seems as if Fields may be on the bench, because it means we get to watch Andy Dalton lead the offense, and I feel like we've been doing that for years. Danny, can we hear you?
Yeah, I think you can hear me. Is that better?
Yes,
that's
tremendously better.
All right. I just looked stupid on the live stream because I pulled it up for the fun of it. Basically, I kind of agree with what both of you are saying, and I said it on Bill Zimmerman's podcast through us, where I was just like, I can kind of see both sides of it, and it's weird to feel like I'm stuck in the middle, because normally, like most people, we feel like we have this need to pick one side or the other. I can totally see the argument of Andy Dalton is not Alex Smith, because he's not in any way, shape, or form, other than the fact that he is a smart veteran quarterback. He's just not the same player Alex Smith was, who threw for 4,000 yards that year as a member of that offense, right? So, but I can also see the other end of mental reps matter. And you saw that when he got his helmet popped off on that blitz he didn't recognize, you know? So it's weird to say I can be talked into saying he should be starting week 1. I can also make the argument that sitting isn't the worst thing in the world for him. It's like Myles Garrett and Aaron Donald don't rip his head off, because, as Brandon pointed out, this isn't just a bad offensive line. This is quite possibly the worst offensive line in the NFL. And to put this in perspective, we were pining as a fan base to have Jermaine Damn Ifedi come back and start at right tackle. And then he got back, and he was awful.
Brandon was on that train. Brandon was ready. Full
I was
steam.
heading the train. I was at the very head of that train, and I'm completely off of it now.
And I mean, it's one of the things, though, like, you're missing what I'm saying. I'm not, like, crucifying Brandon. I'm not crucifying a fan.
I know you're not. I wanted to.
I'm more saying that it's more about the fact that Seattle let this guy walk away for no reason.
Right.
He signed a vet minimum deal. He came back, showed to be pretty productive-ish against bad defenses near the end of the year.
Kicked inside for what it's worth. Like,
Yeah.
originally supposed to not have that tackle level plate.
So it was a lot of stuff that went on, but inevitably Jermaine Ifedi is still Jermaine Ifedi.
Right.
Like, you don't magically figure things out sans some guys here or there on either side of the ball in year 5 and 6. Like, one guy that comes to mind if I'm like giving myself someone, like Jason Babin years ago when he just like figured out how to magically get to the quarterback, but I can't think of one like who just magically became good at football. Like, I don't know. Maybe I'm just naive and
No, I totally hear
thinking
you.
he sucks.
You guys ready to get the show started? Like, officially?
Mhm.
So, the plan as I have it, just so you guys in chat know, is we are going to do our usual 40 to 45 minute recording, and we got to be honest about it, guys. Like, it's got to be 40 to 45 minutes. And thank you, by the way, so much, Adrian, for for supporting the channel. That's really, really awesome. But so after that, we're going to do a Q&A where we'll just interact with the audience. And Brandon, Danny, you guys can like watch the chat as you can like see it, and we'll all do it together. But so first, let's record the show. So let's get quiet and we'll get started. What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to the Rule of Three podcast, a Chicago Bears podcast hosted by yours truly, Robert Schmitz, alongside Brandon Robinson and Danny Meehan. And guys, we are ready for football once again. Whether you're ready or not, frankly, I know I am, and football is right around the corner as the Bears have... Oh gosh, they have a Sunday night debut against maybe the most quarterback improved team in football in Matthew Stafford joining the Los Angeles Rams, and they get to take on Andy Dalton, also new signee to the Chicago Bears, and the rest of this Chicago team. Guys, how good does it feel to have football back on the schedule as just tomorrow night we get to see the Dallas Cowboys take on the Bucs?
I'm just excited to see any football. I mean, it was a great college football season. I mean, college football weekend kickoff, and now we get the NFL. We get the Bucs, Super Bowl champs tomorrow, and I mean, it's exciting. But we have to see the Bears on Sunday night, which it'll be interesting. But I'm just glad to have them back.
Danny, how about you? Football, excited?
I mean, I've got a multitude of reasons to be excited this weekend. We're doing our first live, Rule of Three thing on your channel. We got football back tomorrow night. Follow Brandon for your player prop bets if that's what you want to do. Because what's the saying from last year, B? New week, same dance. We already got Deonte prop bets. My God, it's like it never left. And this weekend, guys, I'm actually going to my bachelor party, so.
That'll be awesome.
Going to be an officially married man here come December. So everything is kind of coming up Millhouse, as it were, to quote Simpsons.
Did you make time to watch the Bears?
Weekend.
I'm gonna watch I'll be home Sunday afternoons. I'll be home recovering.
Lucky man.
Before the Bears game kicks off, just in time to watch Aaron Donald make Andy Dalton tomato soup.
And hey, you know what? That's where we can get back into it, because I think the best thing we can do right now, I thought in April about grabbing y'all for like a schedule, like let's walk through this and predict it. But I hate doing that, mostly because I feel like we never really know who the teams we're going to be playing are, frankly, until the week you play them. But hey, it's the week before the season, so we're as close as we're going to get. We finally know who this team is. We know where everything stands. We can predict things from here. But obviously, as you guys know, there's one question that kind of rules whether or not, like, your record prediction, more than likely, and that's what you think of Andy Dalton paired with when you think Justin Fields is going to start. So I feel like we would be remiss if we didn't start there. Like, let's go around the horn. We'll start with Danny, then Brandon, then myself. Like, what do you think of the Fields situation? Do you think Andy Dalton's going to actually hold Fields off? Do you think Nagy doesn't care and is going to put Fields in when he wants to, regardless of whether or not the Bears are succeeding? And do you think Fields provides the lift that the Bears may need in their wins and loss record to avoid, say, a 5-12 season? Danny?
Man, that was a loaded question that you just
I
set
know
us
it
up
was.
for. So I think the most complicated part is, I think I'm more on record on this show than the two of you are, is saying I think the locker room dynamic matters a lot more than other people do. You can't tell pros that someone is better when it's clear that they're not. And I do think there is a section of Bears fans that has said if Fields is QB2 versus Foles, it kind of means you think he's ready to play regardless of his knowledge of the offense. Do I think Dalton is good enough to, quote unquote, hold off Fields? No. Cream rises to the top eventually. You can't just let this dude sit on the bench and hope for everything. Now, we did see our friend Bill Zimmerman tweet out, he spoke to someone who said it could be as late as week 15. God help this fan base if it's week 15 before they score one behind center. But that would emulate more so the Reed thing, right? Where we didn't see Patrick Mahomes as a rookie until that final week. Now, I just got done saying earlier pre-show that everyone saw that Dalton is not Alex Smith in any way, shape, or form other than being a veteran white quarterback. But I could also see a scenario, I guess, where Dalton does enough where it's like maybe the Bears don't look awful against the Rams. Dalton shows up for his quote-unquote revenge game against the Cincinnati Bungles. And then they go to Cleveland and maybe they pull an upset.
You're really reaching, aren't you?
I'm trying.
I can see it on your face.
You believe that.
The podcast listeners can't see it on your face, so I feel like I have to point it out.
Right, no, but you guys know I'm trying to not be like Mr. Negativity to start the year. Is there a scenario in which it happens? Yeah, because you guys know as well as I do. Weird shit happens in football. Weird stuff, sorry. It just happens within the game. And every year there's a team that is supposed to suck that is magically good. And every year a team that's magically supposed to be good is finishing third or fourth in their division. I think there's a lot of stuff that has to go right. I think personally still that we see Dalton by week 4 because I just don't, or we see Fields by week 4 because I don't think Dalton at this point is the Dalton of old. Is he better than Nick Foles is and better than Mitch Trubisky is? Yeah, that's like being a really tall midget, I guess. Like, it's just hard to say that's a great measuring stick or a high bar because it's not.
Braden, how you feeling?
I mean, I feel good. I mean, this season, if you look at it, how I would say the correct way to look at it. I mean, this season's all about developing Justin Fields. The season isn't about going 10-7 and sneaking into the playoffs. The season's about developing Justin. So as long as that is the plan and they continue to work on that regardless of the win-loss, regardless of the outrage of the fans, like I'm optimistic about the season because at the end of the day, that's what we want. We want this team to be prepared for 2023. Now, is Dalton gonna somehow pull this team to victories? I mean, I can't see it at all just because he's not the type of guy that elevates teams. And this team is struggling on the offensive line and it's struggling at the cornerback position. I don't understand how they could possibly overcome those obstacles based on the schedule. So they're in for a tough season. The fan base just has to stay patient. I am fully accepted of a 5-12 season, and I think that's just fine because they finally have a quarterback. Like the arrow is pointing up, regardless of what the record says this year. As long as Justin Fields doesn't have some horrific injury, like the thing is, he played in the preseason. So we got to see what we wanted to see. We got to see his talent level. we got to see the upside of Justin Fields. I don't need to see anything in a real game that will make me believe in him. Like, that was the good thing about this coaching staff's plan and the regime as a whole. Like, they had a set plan and they got him the work in the preseason where he gets to work against vanilla defenses and develop and learn from his mistakes, as Danny said, getting his head taken off. Now, going into the season week 1, it doesn't even matter about Aaron Donald. Is he going to somehow learn through his mistakes? Like, he's not going to be able to overcome this offensive line. So I think he's better off on the bench. I think that's a good thing. I think this team has a good set plan for him. Everybody just has to stay patient, but that's a very hard thing to do.
One thing to back you up, Brandon, just before anybody jumps down your throat saying, how could you say this is a good thing? At least the Bears are executing a plan as of yet, that they have set benchmarks in their head for when they want to play Fields that aren't just, hey, Justin, try to save my job. I don't know. I mean, I don't know how much I do and don't trust this staff at this point, because those games with Foles were miserable. Like, I had to actually go back and rewatch them. I put that off till like July. That hurt, going back and rewatching some of those, because that was some of the most hopeless offensive football I've seen since the John Fox 2017 season, where if memory serves, our A1 receiver by week 11 was Dontrell Inman, who I think fell out of the league a couple years later, but I digress. When it comes to the Dalton Fields situation, I think you said it pretty well, that I think Fields looks good. I mean, at this point, there's nothing that Fields showed us in the preseason that has me legitimately worried about his NFL future. But if I was to separate Fields' readiness from the Bears' readiness to house Fields properly, I might actually agree with the decision too. The way that I think about it is I've tried to go through different quarterbacks that I thought of on whether they played early or not, right? I thought about what happened when Derek Carr got hurt, that he went from this brave quarterback in the pocket that was slinging the ball all over the place to kind of a mouse that checked the ball down at any sign of pressure. Like, one hit can do a lot for you. On the other hand, you've got Desean Watson, who obviously looked incredible after 2 really rough games against the Jacksonville Jaguars and a tough Jets defense. He bounced back to throw like 19 touchdowns in 5 games. Like, it was insane. Then he got hurt. But one guy I'll throw out to y'all that just comes to mind, right, is Kyler Murray, right? We don't talk about this a lot, because Kyler Murray is mobile. He's so much fun to watch on film. He truly has every tool. But I'll throw this at you, Brandon. I do feel like the Arizona Cardinals have underinvested in offensive line since the moment Murray was quarterback. And now when you watch Murray's play style, he expects to have no protection whatsoever. And I think that hurries his reads and creates a lot of his interception issues, because he's not watching the defense maybe as carefully as he could due to the protection problems. And when I watch Justin Fields in the preseason, I keep finding myself seeing him wanting to trust that offensive line, and I don't want him to lean away from that. I don't want him to get hit by Aaron Donald and learn that he can't trust his center and interior offensive line. I don't want him to get crushed by, Myles Garrett in week 3 and a litany of other pass rushers and learn that protection is never going to be there, because sure, it works for Russell Wilson and Desean Watson. It could work for Fields in the future, but that drop back deep passing game is the heart and soul of a lot of deep strike offenses. And I don't want that to go away from him. Does that make sense? Like, when you think of the Kyler situation, do you think that environment led to the downs that we see from Kyler's game, or do you think that those were always going to be there?
No, the bad habits that he's forming are from the situation that he's in. And that is the number one issue I have with Justin Fields playing. It's not that he's going to get hurt, because injuries just happen. He could get injured on the way to the practice field. But creating bad habits, that's not going to happen while he's sitting on the bench learning from Andy Dalton. But when he has to escape the pocket every other play because Jermaine Ifedi can't block and Jason Peters gets hurt week 2 and now they're starting a 5th-round rookie, like, those are the situations that you should worry about, because you don't want him bailing from the pocket. Because the good thing about Justin Fields is he can scramble and he can make defenders miss and get outside the pocket. But at the end of the day, he's a pocket quarterback. Like, he's the most accurate pocket quarterback in this draft, and you want that to continue. You don't want him to turn into a quarterback that's scrambling every other play, because that's not who he is as a player.
What do you think, Danny? Do you think that, I know you kind of touched on this, but that maybe there is some positivity towards the Bears taking some time at least to figure out what they're doing on the offensive front, than as opposed to just throwing Fields in, probably upgrading their offense, but potentially costing those bad habits? How worried are you about that?
Well, I mean, I think I've been pretty adamant on here before about seeing ghosts. Like when the idea of Darnold came up earlier in the season, seeing ghosts is one thing I think quarterbacks have the hardest thing to bounce back from. Can it be done? Yeah. You brought him up earlier. Derek Carr came back from seeing ghosts after he broke that leg prior to the playoffs.
Though. It took
that took
3
years. Right. These dudes don't just magically forget how to feel pressure and stuff like that. They feel stuff that's not there because they were getting their head torn apart. You know, am I worried about habits being formed specifically with him? No, I'm not, but that's a character judgment. He may start getting popped and all of a sudden have no idea how to handle that, because he's never really been hit that consistently in his career, because he's always been the fastest and best athlete on the field, or he's always been protected. Make no mistake, he wasn't really under duress a whole lot at Ohio State. Like, he had times where he took big hits and he had to come back from them, which is why it was funny. He made like the joke after he took that shot that popped his helmet off. Like, oh, I've taken worse hits before. I believe he was alluding to the Clemson game, right, where he bruised his ribs or whatever.
He alluded to it directly after that first preseason game, too, where he was like, I got to retire the spin move. So he's taken, like you're saying, he's taken his fair share of hits.
Right. So am I worried about him specifically developing bad habits? No, not really. But you can kind of avoid it by doing the sitting thing. And, I mean, I know you and I have talked off the air and offline, or however you want to term it, Robert, about the idea of say week 4 is the magic number we've all had in mind because of Detroit. If you can have him avoid those 3 like big bad teams to start the year, or not big bad teams in terms of Cincinnati, but like if you can have him avoid the Browns and Aaron Donald and Jalen Ramsey, and all of a sudden you line them up against his, Bears legend Doug Buffone termed them tomato cans, with teams like Detroit and Oakland back to back, to make him realize it's okay, you can do this. Like, and kind of ease him in. Does every NFL team have bad men? Yeah, the Raiders have guys like Max Crosby, for instance, just as a name to throw out there. But it's a lot better than Aaron Donald or Myles Garrett coming down and breathing down your neck every other play. I like I said, I'm really torn on him because I can see both sides of the argument, and it's really weird for me to be that kind of in the middle. But I do agree with what Brandon is saying, that they are taking the right approach. The hard part for us as fans, armchair analysts, whatever it might be, is the benchmarks aren't tangible. We're not in Hallis Hall. We're not seeing the benchmarks being met because we aren't there. We can't physically see anything that's being done when he's being told, yeah, you're meeting these certain things. Does that make sense?
Yep. I mean, it's the whole, we watched Kendall Vildor a little bit last season. People go, he's a great tackler. What a great player. And then you watch him a little bit more in the preseason, you go, not a good player anymore. And all we can do is react to the film that we watch, right? And sometimes I feel like we can forget that when we say the Bears need to play Fields so that we can see what the Bears need to see Fields to see what he's got. Sometimes I feel like they're housing the fact that the coaches know. Coaches see him in practice. Coaches talk to him in the meeting rooms. That whole see what he's got thing, that's for us, the fans. And hey, there are sometimes like the Jeremy Langford thing that I think most fans can look and go, that's not, Jeremy Langford's probably not really it. But, there are plenty of times where the coaches do, like, they know what they're seeing and they have to go from there. And it's just a matter of trusting the staff. I think you guys would agree with me, whether you're up or down on Nagy, trusting this staff right now, like that word trust is a hard one because Nagy's given us nothing in pressers to make us feel better, especially with how the 2019 and 2020 seasons have gone. But hey, truth be told, it's not going to get better without winning games. Speaking of winning games, before we talk whole season, are there any brightsiders in this room about the week 1 game? Like, you don't even have to say the Bears are going to win. Do you think that it's going to be the pasting that it has been billed to be, or do you think that the Bears may show that, there's something to any given Sunday and maybe lose a little closer? I don't know. Where are y'all's heads at? Because I know where I'm thinking, but I'll go last.
I think the Rams are a really good football team. I think that, that can't be understated, honestly. Like they're
Man, that was a hot take right there.
They're
good at
they're
football,
a really
guys.
good football team. The Bears are not a very good football team. If I was to say that they would somehow win the game or keep it close, like I would be pulling something out of my what. Because the thing is,
your arse.
The Rams have a very good receiving core. They have an upgraded quarterback. They have a good offensive line. I think Darrell Henderson is a lot better of a running back than a lot of other people think. They had a lot of depth last year that will be filling in on defense. So I really don't think that their roster is too much far down from where it was last year, because I think Matt Stafford makes up for a whole lot of that, because I don't think Jared Goff is good at all. I think the Lions will be a very, very bad football team. And you're going to see the big difference between the quarterbacks this season. And I think the Bears are in trouble, but I think that's fine.
Hey, Brandon, that's the point, though, because you hit at something that I think has been really key, that everybody's focusing on the Matt Stafford acquisition and the good that comes from it, and forgetting that the Rams did lose a good bit here and there that Stafford's going to have to make up for. For instance, I don't think this is going to be a good day for the Bears defense, mostly because of their back end, right? Mostly because of Travis Gibson and the rest that are going, or like Travis Gibson and not Travis. Oh my word. So sorry. I had a pop-up that I've got to dismiss. I'll cut that out in post. Yeah. Tashawn Gibson and Kendall Vildor and everybody that comes from there. Like the DB setup with Duke Shelley, maybe Marquis Christensen starting is nasty. And if the Rams are smart, they will exploit that. And Sean Desai's going to have to put on a masterclass to get away from it. That said, I can't help but find myself thinking, guys, that the Bears shouldn't be able to run the ball. Their offensive line is not helpful. Like, that's not going to do much. But the Rams did lose John Johnson and Troy Hill, and Duke Staley. So I don't know what this is going to look like under a new defensive coordinator, but I can't help but think that the Bears may have a chance here to look somewhat competent as far as a throwing team if they can properly use things like play action with run blocking fronts to establish pockets for Andy Dalton, who's a little bit quicker than Nick Foles and might be able to live back there. Again, a little bit better than somebody who doesn't move almost at all. And if he's able to be even somewhat accurate in the areas that may hurt the Rams, who have a slightly weaker inside linebacking core than others, then that could be a real positive. But we're really talking moral victories. I mean, I think we're all on the same page there, because it would take something similar to the Bears' miracle victory over Tampa Bay for them to beat the Rams in Los Angeles. It would take that voodoo magic that they've seemed to cast on Jared Goff over the last 3 times they've played the guy, where they continue to have maybe their worst game of the season against Chicago. I mean, let's not forget, we're a year removed from the Rams basically trying to lose and just not managing to do it against the Bears. But we'll see. We'll see what happens, because I guess I find myself thinking that there may be some truth to the idea that Andy Dalton offers a more of a QB upgrade than I think is being noted, because Nick Foles was just so inaccurate. Like, I did a lot of apologizing for Nick Foles that as I go back and watch that tape, I had no business doing, because I kept thinking next week was the week that he would finally throw accurately. He'd thrown accurately throughout the rest of his career, and it just never showed up. Like from what is it, that first week against the week 4 game that escapes me, all the way through week 10's game against the Vikings. And Dalton's not that inaccurate, so we'll have to see what happens. Danny, how are you feeling? Any rays of hope?
I mean, the ray of hope is that, like, if you're talking like in terms of winning, that your front seven dominates. That's where it comes from. The secondary might be legitimately, we were talking about the offensive line, it might be the worst secondary in football. Like, it's not hyperbole. The outside corner they signed back in Artie Burns following the 53-man cut down legitimately has an argument as the second best outside corner roster behind Jalen Johnson. Does it mean he's worth more of a look than Kindle Valdor? No, it does not mean that. It means he has an argument of being the second most talented on this roster, just given pedigree, first-round pick status, et cetera, et cetera. Same thing goes for Marquis Christian, being the nickel back or the nickel safety, however you want to term him, rather. And those guys were both cut and brought back after the fact so they could get people put on practice squad and so on and so forth. Like, Cooper Kupp is going to have his way. Robert Woods is going to have his way, because the way the Bears defense is designed, Brandon will tell you, Jalen Johnson isn't going to be following people around. They're going to be on one side for the most part, at least from what I can gather. Like, I think Robert Woods is going to be going up against Jalen Johnson every play, or is he just going to go to the other side and say, oh, hey, Artie, hey, Kindle, I'm just going to hang out over here all game, have a good time. Same thing. Cooper Kupp's not an outside player. He's going to be on Duke Shelley and Marquis Christian. Like, your hope is going to be that Akeem Hicks and
Roquan.
Roquan.
Your hope is that a weird
Roquan is covering Kupp.
Your hope is that a weird too high setup and Desai work together to create very limited responsibilities for Duke Shelley and so on and so forth, even though, as we know, a defender that can't play zones well might as well not exist. So Duke Shelley does have to bring at least his A game to take away something of the Rams, or else the Rams are going to be attacking the Bears
but the
with
issue
an extra
relying
man.
on Shelley is Shelley doesn't belong on his team. I think he's a draft status. The fact that he was a pick and not a guy who was a UDFA. Robert, you watched it too. He was awful in the preseason.
Oh, I know. The trouble is, Christensen wasn't any better.
And he, marginally is better than whatever Duke Shelley was.
Brandon's trying hard not to like grimace at just the thought.
But then here's what I'll bring up to you, Robert. Like, you brought up the quick passing game and quick hitters. Like, that's great. Who's the receiving core?
Oh, for the Bears?
Besides, really, outside of the top two, who do you care about?
Well, it's funny because PFF did like a data study at one point, and they basically showed that the strength in an offense comes down to, first off, how good is the one receiver, but then immediately, like, what separates a decent offense from a good offense is how good it's the second receiver, and you really only need the third guy come playoff season. And I don't think the Bears are built to be a successful playoff team. Maybe they could surprise us, but I don't think they're quite there yet.
How good is Darnell Mooney?
That's a good question, isn't it? He had about as good of a rookie season as I think you could have.
For a fifth-round rookie from Tulane, he was an aberration. He was awesome. He had 600 yards receiving. And
he had like 150 yards on the field missed. Just to give him the same credit we gave Anthony Miller for years.
Right. That's Anthony Miller makes me feel bad because I loved him. But and now I'm going to cry because that was him and Robert Quinn were my actor every week. Like, if they just show up.
Please. I feel you. I feel like
it's just one of those things. I think we're putting way too much hope into a second-year, fifth-round receiver the way like it's just way too much pressure for what he is. Like, and then the argument then comes in of the guy they just picked up off the street, Rashad Perriman, could be their third best receiver right now, just based off his last 2 seasons.
Oh yeah, I mean maybe. I really don't know. Like that's I think the key here is if you go into it sounds silly, right? If you go into Sunday night with low expectations, you may find yourself enjoying the football game more than you
Here
thought
we
you
go.
would. Like, I mean, that's the key here, right? You keep saying, Danny, you use phrase like, I think we're putting a little bit too much expectation on a 6th-round draft pick in Duke Shelley and Kendall Vildor. I'm not expecting much from them at all, honestly. Like, I want to see the team's defense look decent, but like maybe decent from a schematic standpoint, and I want to see the offense have some life. And outside of that, take the L, move on to Cincinnati, see what you can do at home. I mean, you got to have proper expectations to really enjoy a football game, right? Like, you can't go in there thinking,
I know what my expectation is. I'm saying when you go on the Twitter timeline of people who legitimately think this line is good, or these receivers are great, or that the secondary is going to be just fine because Jalen Johnson showed some stuff last year. When you're looking at a piece, not the sum of the wholeness
right.
of it. I'm fully expecting them to go there and Robert Woods to get 200 yards receiving. No one can cover him.
Hopefully the Bears figure something out.
Obviously, I'm being hyperbolic, but Robert Woods is about.
I watched Alshon Jeffrey do it enough, like the 200-yard receiving games, that that's not even hyperbole anymore. If somebody really goes out there and dominates, it's possible. But either way, we digress. I think that we've hit the point where we have a good feeling about what we know what's going to happen on Sunday night, but now it's time to talk after the break about what we're going to do throughout the rest of this season. What does a Dalton-led team do from a wins and losses standpoint? Where does Fields come in? What does that mean for the team? What is the defense likely to do through this season? We've hinted at it. Let's talk about it on the flip side. Guys, let's talk about it on the flip side. We'll be right back. Okay, so as you guys online have seen, we've got like less than a minute on this Zoom meeting. We're going to figure out another video solution here real soon. Brandon, Danny, do you guys do Discord? I'll send you a link. We can pop something out. But we will be right back. You're going to see me disappear for a little bit as we get this thing sorted.
Hello.
We'll be back for the second half. Okay, let's see. Oh, shoot. Aha! Okay, so I think I'm back. Let me know if y'all can hear me. I think you should be able to. Rad, and we will get everything figured out as we go. But Zoom totally shutting us down was a real bummer. Thank goodness, Curtis. That's great. Okay, wanted to throw a couple things out there just to acknowledge the chat. Chrome, I agree with you. I don't think the Rams are Super Bowl good, but I do think they're like top 10 good. So they are a good team, especially if McVay's offense works like it should with a step up with Matthew Stafford, but we'll actually have to see if that happens. That's a decent question. We don't really know. So somebody mentioned like bacon football. I love it. I shouldn't have hope, but I do. Hey, you know what? You never know. I mean, you don't know whether Matthew Stafford serves up 2 pick sixes and that results in not only 2 defensive stops, but 14 points the other way. Like, we don't know. But like, that is why they play the game. But I think it's best to go in with minimalist expectations so that you don't know. like, or so that at least you like can be surprised, like at what happens next. Let me manage the Discord setup stuff. Oh, perfect. Let's see. I'm teaching these guys Discord. Haha. You guys are really watching this like we're working through all the technical difficulties. But so yeah, and then so let's see. I think Jeffrey is a free agent. You're totally right, Curtis. Like that's a funny one. But so let's see. Yeah, it is a bit of a bummer that the Bears don't have a first rounder, but hey, look, every single pick counts. And if you get a higher second rounder, you could trade down for 2 or like or an extra third rounder. It could be just about anything. But so let's see. Somebody mentioned what's Darnell Mooney really going to benefit from Andy Dalton, who's not a real deep thrower. Well, Andy Dalton does work the intermediate area of the field a lot, like a whole lot. Hang on. Let's see here. Oh, man. Yeah, no kidding, John. Like, talking about trading up and say, like, you can trade down. Yeah, I wish that didn't hit quite so hard home. But it really does, doesn't it? All right, I heard a little doo-doo. Who do we got here? There's Danny. Hey! How does it feel? How does it feel to join the young people on Discord? Are you a Discord guy?
How old do you think I am?
30.
Damn.
30?
31. Excuse me.
Man, I'm telling you, like I'm only like what 4.5 years younger than you, because I'm about to be 27. But like I remember back when this was Skype, and then it was Curse, and then now it's Discord. Like I don't know. I just you guys are football guys like you and Brandon, so I place my bet in the no category of technological things.
No, I keep myself pretty hip, as the young folks say.
Look at you.
No, I think I used to be on Discord. I'm a pretty big video gamer too, so I had to figure it out.
It's
a couple of years back.
It's half problem, half fun. I know the feeling. But yeah, so you're back, and now we're just waiting on Brandon to kick off the second half of the podcast.
Before we kick off the second half, I would like to say something to whoever put it in the chat. Man, someone said optimism from someone getting married. Damn. Hey man.
Somebody asked how your MySpace is, Danny. I think that's hilarious. In case
sir, get on my level. I had a Zanga. All right.
I'm telling you. So the chat, by the way, as we sit in the middle break, is talking about how like I didn't know you could trade down. You know, Danny, it really hurts me. The more that I stew on it, it hurts me that the Bears haven't picked in the third round since Montgomery, who was a trade up. Like,
dude, you know I don't claim myself to be some sort of genius or expert or anything. I'm an armchair draft analyst who really puts time and effort into it. The way Pace handles stuff in the draft offends my sensibilities. It's one thing to go get Justin Fields and a quarterback. You better hope to God Sam Cosmi and Dylan Reduns aren't any good at football. You better hope and pray they're bad, because you traded up more to go get a guy who has back issues as a 320-pound person. And I don't care what anybody says, the terms minor and back surgery don't coexist.
I hear you. I want to be fair, Danny, to the room of people that we told on draft night that Tevin Jenkins was borderline miraculous, like in terms
but
of
what
finding.
Did I also say? Love the player, hate the process.
Oh well, yeah. I mean, agree there, 100%.
Yeah, you can. It's just it's willful negligence on the part of the management that you keep doing this year after. You can't keep walking away from drafts with 2 picks in the first 4 rounds. You can't do that.
Well, I mean, that's how you end up, right? With like a nickelback that you drafted out of the 6th round. I mean, hey, look, can I throw something out there, Danny? Kendall Vildor is a very successful 5th round pick. already.
He
Like,
is.
if he takes up any starting role,
Yeah.
let alone if he becomes a decent starting nickel, let alone if he's even just a depth corner. Oh, no. No, he's a perfectly fine 5th rounder at that point. Like, it's because we've hit this point where Larry Borum, also a 5th rounder, has Bears fans going, oh my gosh, is he going to start?
Sorry, Adrian. I misunderstood the comment. I thought you were making a snarky comment to me.
Like,
My mistake.
but you know what I mean, Danny? Like, we've got a
Yeah,
fan base that's
I'm
like,
for sure with
Larry
you.
Borum's going to be a starter. And hey, I hope so. Like, that would be great. That would be
Go watch Larry Borum's footwork on the left side and tell me he's going to be a starter.
Hey,
please.
That's the thing, though. His feet look like they're disconnected. I also can't stand his hand placement. That's neither here nor there. Like, he's got room to go, even just in how he approaches handling standard blockers. But that's why he's a 5th rounder. He wasn't
Hey, can you
drafted
guys
to
hear me?
play this year.
Yeah,
I
we
can.
got you, B. We got
See
you.
me?
Yes.
Oh.
Can you
I
see
think-
us?
And you were making fun. Look, the oldest guy in here figured it out faster than the youngest guy
He
in
did.
here.
Yeah, I'm officially. I am not the youngest guy. First off, actually, Robert, how old are you?
I'm 26.
Yeah, I'm not the youngest guy in here.
Oh, I thought
And
you were younger
so-
than B.
No, I have a baby face, but
I have a baby.
no, I'm at that age where when I
Damn.
try something new, I just can't figure it out. I feel ancient.
Hey, I figured this helps us at least. Like, I can record it on an alternate method. And I've never seen, just so you guys know, I've never seen Zoom kick us off. Like, I've said on 2-hour Zooms with these guys before. So maybe it's just like a minutes thing. or
Because typically we record through my Zoom profile and I pay for the Zoom account.
Yes. Shh. But so at least this gets us our live stream back. Can everybody hear us all the same? I mean, I can hear the same, and so it seems like it's coming through fine. But yeah, you guys just let us know. We will kick off the predictive part of the show here in just a second. Feel free to throw in a couple more questions. Adrian, I love the enthusiasm about marriage. I've been married for 4 years. It's been great. Very pro-marriage when you find the right person. But yeah, you get the idea. As far as, let's see. Oh, here's a question that I'll just throw to you guys while people like potentially put questions in the chat. Who have you seen more development from than you expected so far this season?
So,
preseason,
Robert,
really.
I know when we recorded our last Rule 3, it was just you and I because, sometimes schedules just don't line up and you got to get the product out there, right? And you asked me who was the next guy before they'd even played a game.
The
that we
impossible
needed to
jump,
see.
right?
Yeah. Travis Gibson. That was the name. That's who it's always been. And he showed it. He looks like a completely different body type this year, which is awesome. It shows that the NFL training staff is doing what they're supposed to do in terms of weight training, diet, etc. And, we always invoke our namesake Rule of 3, which is you have 3 pass rushers that get home, you make your defense's life a lot easier, right? Robert Quinn was supposed to be that guy. He's got, allegedly he had drop foot or something like that, issues with his back already. He's never going to be the same guy again. And unfortunately, he's stuck here for probably at least through this year, maybe through next year, depending on his dead money. So Gibson, for me at least, was the guy that needed to take a step up. And it looks like we may be getting that. I wouldn't be shocked if we get upwards of 5-6 sacks from him, with just based off against the backups. But that's my opinion. I'm sure it's become very popular, especially with the PFF numbers that have come out with him during preseason and everything. But that was the dude I thought from off rip, as it were, that needed to take the impossible jump for them to have any prayer at the playoffs, because they're going to be the defense for all intents and purposes.
What do you think, B? Has Gibson been your guy too, or have you seen development for somebody else?
Oh no, it's him, and I don't think it's relatively close because, last year he looked so raw that you could argue that he didn't necessarily belong on the field at times just because he looked so out of place. But now overall, you're seeing him put together pass rush moves. You're seeing him come to balance. You're seeing him understand how to orchestrate some of these run fits.
because a lot of times he was getting reached around, which is what happens when you play out of position. And the thing is, playing outside linebacker in a 3-4 defense, I mean, you're not getting a lot of those reps in college. There's not a lot of defenses in college that run a regular 3-4 style defense. So I think he's made waves. I think everybody can see that. I think the hard part is that position opposite of Khalil Mack. A lot of people view him as the same position, but they're really not. That position opposite of Mack, they're going to be put into coverage a lot. They have to be extremely, extremely versatile because they're going to be on the field side every single time. Because the thing is, you want Mack rushing the passer.
And be on top of that, like I think the thing we really discounted was Quinn doesn't care about that. He wants to put he's really not even a true edge, as it were. He's a defensive end who's meant for a 40 front, which is great for the Bears in a sense, and really anyone in the league, because teams are in nickel 65+% of the time anymore, or nickel or dime, where you're going to have a 40 front of some sort. But we saw Quinn try to cover last year. It was bad, and he really, even as a guy who's a 40 front defensive end, you kind of got to use that term loosely too, because he's not really that either. He's a pass rusher. He doesn't care about setting an edge. He doesn't care about trying to funnel the runner anywhere. He wants to just go get the quarterback. And that's great when you're the guy in Dallas getting sacks the year before you get here. But when you're getting, what did he have, 2 sacks last year, something like that? Like, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but like it
wasn't good.
That's not going to cut it. And that's where Gibson does matter, where in a sense you could still have Quinn and Gibson maybe at times on the same side of the field where you're just saying, hey, Quinn, go get the passer. Gibson, you're going to be out here, or whatever it might be, if a certain scenario called for it. Whereas with last year, you really didn't have that option. You just kind of had to set Quinn outside and say, hey, cover the flat, or whatever his responsibility may have been on play X, Y, or Z.
I think one thing about Gibson's development that really has me excited is, so the Bears had this player, right? And Brandon's been quoted as saying this. I actually agree with him. And it was maybe the worst situation for the Bears, where they had a perfect scheme fit Fangio player that was ultimately going to cost too much. His name was Leonard Floyd. Now, Bears fans have a very rocky history with Floyd because as a pass rusher and a first-round pick, he was super underperforming. The trouble was that he did all the things that a defensive coach, Danny, I'm sure you know this too, would just, they'd just star eyes over, right? He set the edge with force. He controlled his gaps in the run. He covered surprisingly well. He just didn't rush the passer well. So when it came time to pay Leonard Floyd, there was no question. Like, the Bears and him weren't going to come to agreement because he was a specialist edge defender in a league that needs pass rushers, and so the Bears instead threw a bunch of money at a true pass rusher and got nothing out of it. So the point is, going back to all of this, Travis Gibson is, to me, what I'm seeing, Brandon, if this is what you're seeing, kind of similar. He so far looks like he's really starting to understand how to do all those things that, hey, if you're not going to succeed against rushing the passer, at least succeed in the run game, at least succeed in coverage, and hey, throw some pass rushing pressure too while you're at it. That helps keep the defense healthy, and it helps keep the defense affordable, because already they're starting to stack up some of the most expensive defensive, general salaries out of the whole NFL. So we'll see what happens. I do think Gibson's the perfect person to add to this defense at this point, so we'll see what goes from there. You guys ready to get the second half started?
Sure, let's do it.
Perfect. And we are back with the Rule of Three podcast. I'm Robert Schmitz, talking to Danny Meehan and Brandon Robinson, as now we get into the predictive phase of this podcast. Guys, let's keep it really simple. Let's say Andy Dalton starts until you get to decide he doesn't. What do you think the Bears' record is going to be with Dalton, with Fields, and overall? Danny, we'll start with you.
Oh, it's a tough question because I'm not one much for predictions. I do it for the funness of it, I guess would be the term. Fun of it.
We
Funness
like
is not a
funness.
word.
We like funness.
Funness. We'll go with funness or Devin Funches.
Oh, didn't he just get cut? That seems like it's got
Yeah,
bad juju around it.
Oh God. But I'm gonna stick with we're gonna see Fields week 4 and probably 1 and 2. You'll win the Dalton revenge game and you're probably gonna get it with him. But the with Fields question is hard because, as I've said at nauseum on this podcast, on my timeline, in group chats with friends, text messages, et cetera, whatever it might be, Justin Herbert had the literal best rookie season of quarterbacks ever had, and they won 6 games. So is the benchmark say he comes even remotely close in the last, call it 13 games? Is 5-8 fair? Is 4-12 or is 4-13 or 4 and
4-13 was all 17 games.
4-9. So 4-9 in his starts. Is that realistic? But it doesn't matter if they only win 5, 6, 7 games if Fields shows that he's the guy. Just like it didn't matter that the Chargers only won 6 games because Justin Herbert was awesome. That's what it comes down to, and that's where I can see the frustration point from the fan base of just play him right away, see what he's got, let him learn. But again, that's back to the gray area of I see both sides of the argument. But I'll say week 4, 1 and 2 going into the game. They win the next 2, so that puts them at 3 and 2. That finishing out 7 and 9, or 7 and 10, something like that.
Hey, that's not so bad. If anything, that might be a decent season according to the way things have been projected.
Yeah, I mean that's me trying to be optimistic, but that's also including health. We haven't even touched on the fact that Eddie Goldman's already probably not playing week 1 after looking like a monster in the preseason.
Oh boy. I feel like the hardest part about all this projection, right? Believe it or not, it's not the offense that I'm worried about. It's that I can't figure out how to project this defense. The only thing we've seen from this defense is that their D-line is deep. It's deep and it's good. If Robert Quinn doesn't play well, whatever. You could put Travis Gibson in and expect a little bit of juice from him, Akeem Hicks, a dominant Eddie Goldman. I mean, hopefully he plays because he looked great in the preseason. And a whole bunch of other defensive linemen that are going to come in. Kyrus Tonga looked solid, so on and so forth. But then, what the heck do we do with the secondary? Well, the bright side, as I'm sure Brandon could chime in, is that the secondary looks like it's running a modern scheme. They're running 2 high safeties. They're rotating in and out of cover 2, cover 3, cover 4. They're not giving away what it is they're doing. And hey, I remember 2 years ago, we all used to talk about how Eddie Goldman was going to be that guy. Not Eddie Goldman. I am so sorry. Eddie Jackson, that guy in the secondary. The defenses were just looking away from him. Well, I think you guys will agree. Roquan Smith, the one defender that we haven't seen at all this preseason, is going to be that guy if he can stay healthy in the middle of the field, where I don't think defenses want to throw anywhere near him. And so that gives Sean Desai a couple of things to play with, right? The question is whether that's going to be enough. The question is whether Jalen Johnson is enough at CB1 against Robert Woods, let alone Mike Evans and Brandon Ayuk and Devontae Adams and the litany of other guys he's going to have to play that are really good players. Is Kendall Vildor going to hold up his end of the bargain? If the Bears play out of base, is Alec Ogletree going to be enough? Danny Trevathan, Duke Shelley, there are enough problems on this Bears team that the trouble for me, for instance, Brandon, isn't asking myself, okay, so can the Bears score 27 points against the Lions with Dalton? It's how many points can Vegas score against this Bears defense, and are the Bears offense going to be able to score more than that? When it comes to the wins and loss records, it's the defense that I really can't foresee, because as I'm sure you guys know, a good defensive line and a bad secondary means the occasional 3 and out with a sack, a stuffed run, and an 8-yard pass, and then a 70-yard pass the next drive that ends up in the end zone. So I don't really know But if I had to just stake it, where do I think this record's going to land? I think Andy Dalton's going to create a lot of moral victories and then also a whole lot of losses. I think they'll look better than things did with Foles, but I don't know, for instance, if the Bears are truly good enough to be a locked-in win against the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, I'm pretty down on the Bengals, so I think that the Bears will win that game. But it's mostly because I'm low on them, not because I think that this Bears team is great, and I'm hoping that we can see something from the wide receivers, sure. But as I look through a schedule that's got Baltimore on it, it's got San Fran on it, it's got Tampa Bay on it, it's got Green Bay on it twice, it's got a bad Giants team. They could surely win that game. You play the Lions twice. You could probably get those two. I keep coming back to the same thing. Brandon, I'll kick it to you on this. I feel like it all comes down to the Vikings games, probably, because the way fate likes to toy with us, the Bears have 2 games against a Vikings team that are, I would say, is probably in a similarly disappointing position as the Bears, for different reasons, of course. And if the Bears lose both of those games, this could be a 5-12 season in a hurry, maybe. But I also think there's a chance that the Bears could win both of those games. And if they're the kind of team that wins both of those, maybe they squeeze out that 9-8, 8-9 wild card spot. I don't know. Where's your head at?
Not very close to that. I think the floor is probably 4-13. I think the ceiling is probably 7-10, honestly. I think this is a 5-12 team. I think they're going to hold off on Justin Fields as long as possible. But how I see this playing out the early part of the season, I just don't see that lasting because the fan base, once this team ends up 0-3, and yeah, I think they'll go 0-3. That includes losing to the Bengals. I think this fan base will go wild and they'll be calling for Matt Nagy's head. And that's when Justin Fields will take the field against the Lions and they'll probably win that game. But, I mean, just looking at this schedule, I mean, they have a gauntlet of games. In the middle of their schedule, they play Green Bay, Tampa Bay, the 49ers, the Steelers, and the Ravens, all in a row. And then the end of the season, you got the Cardinals, you got the Packers, you got the Vikings, who should be improved. You got the Seahawks. You got the Giants. I don't think the Giants are that bad just because I think their defense is going to continuously be good because, I mean, their defense is really stacked and no one ever talks about that. And then they got the Vikings to finish off the season. I don't see many gimmies on this schedule. So it's really hard to find wins, to be honest with you.
And see, it's funny, Brandon, because what I'm hearing as you're saying that is a real lack of confidence in the defense specifically. I mean, am I picking that up correctly?
It depends how you wanna look at it. I'm very optimistic on Jalen Johnson, on Eddie Jackson, on Roquan Smith. The D line is nasty. I mean, you didn't even mention Blau Nichols, Mario Edwards, Angelo Blackson, and Blackson was good in the preseason. Like their D line is
Blackson's a player. I agree
deep.
with that. I think Blackson's a player.
Yeah, he really gets off the line consistently.
Yeah.
It's gonna depend on how teams game plan against this defense. Because if they were smart, they would get in a lot of empty situations where they could spread out this defense, expect zone, and then just attack Vildor, attack Shelley, attack Gibson. Because there's going to be a lot of holes in this defense, and it doesn't matter how good Eddie Jackson, Roquan, and Jalen are. I mean, they can't cover the entire field. And the thing is about this pass rush is Khalil Mack has. I believe he started trending downwards as far as pressure on the quarterback goes, and they don't really have a dynamic second pass rushers. They have a bunch of guys that can rush the passer a little bit, but they don't have another dynamic pass rusher. So I think that in certain situations, like an empty against the Bengals, I think they'll struggle in those situations.
I'm sitting here stewing on it. Yo, go for it, Danny.
I mean, I kind of tend to agree with B, and I think kind of what Brandon's getting at is the same thing that I worried about when we had expectations, like legitimate expectations, after the first Nagy at the helm. And I don't know if the offense is going to be able to sustain drives. At a certain point, if your defense is on the field for 28, 32, 34, 40 plus minutes, no matter how good that front seven is, you're going to lose something off your fastball. You know? So Khalil Mack might have a game of 2, 3, 4 sacks, but if he's on the field for 9 snaps, who cares? Like, it's such a hard dynamic to explain, and everyone like tends to want to blame the defense. Like, oh, well, it's their fault. They let up X amount of points. Well, the offense had the ball 17 minutes. You don't win not having the ball. So the defense is definitely trending downward, especially when you factor in corners are becoming more and more important. Interior pass rushers are becoming more important. And the Bears are deficient in both of those. Those are 2 of the 3 most important positions, outside corner and interior pass rusher. Who's the interior pass rusher for the Bears? Akeem Hicks, who is on the wrong side of 30, been hurt, and apparently has an issue that we don't know about with something, whether it be contract related or whatever it might be. Like, I just don't know how much you can expect of them when we really don't know what the what's the benchmark for the offense. What's a realistic expectation for points per game? Robert, do you have an answer? B, do you? Because I don't. What's
17.
the points per game? 17.
I
That's
feel
where I
like-
was at. I was
feel
like
it's
two,
gonna
two touchdowns and a field goal.
I can't help but feel like points per game right now is a terrible measurement because I don't see this Bears offense being consistent, right? Against, like, say, the Lions or the Raiders, I think they may do similarly to last year. I mean, let's remember, this Bears offense was so bizarre last year because when they finally played, like, truly bad defenses, they roasted them. Like, roasted them and roasted them again. So it may average out to, like, 20 and a half, 21 points. But like you're saying, against
When
good
they play a
defenses-
defense, okay, Robert, let me rephrase it. When they play a defense that's not a bunch of, or a
Right.
team that's not a bunch of bums, what do you realistically expect with Andy Dalton at the helm? Because it sounds like, despite what I might think, it sounds like they plan to keep Dalton at the helm as long as they can.
I think against, say, the Rams, I mean, God forbid the Browns. Like, the Bears probably score, like, 10 points. I want to say 10, maybe 13. But the Rams, they would need to hit a bunch of deep strikes to approach 24. But, yeah, I mean, my head's at 17, too. Like, as far as this weekend.
Right, and like I said, it's not trying to, like, just shut it down, but you're trying to put a realistic thought process into it. And we saw the Dalton-led offense against ones with their ones, and they didn't really do much.
Well, to be totally fair to that, like, because there are a lot of reasons to be negative. That specifically, I remember the Bears, like, they iced 2 of their 5 starting offensive linemen, which is not going to help anything. But I digress. The point is, I think Brandon said this really well in the chat just a little while ago. There are a lot of reasons to be down on this team's record, but I still find myself thinking that at the end of the day, if the 2021, and Brandon, by the way, mute your microphone, we can hear that, like, little scrape here and there. No worries, though. If the 2021 Bears in Week 15 were up against the 2020 Bears, I think they'd win. Like, I think that there's a decent chance that this year's team is better than last year's team. I think that the trouble is the teams on their schedule are absolute nightmares. So really, when it comes to the record prediction, I honest to goodness think that the most positive thing that I could say that you guys might actually agree on is that really, if the chalk plays out, like if the Ravens look like the Ravens and the 49ers look like the 49ers and Tom Brady remains totally ageless and the Green Bay thing doesn't implode, etc., 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 yeah, the Bears probably win 6 games, right? Maybe 7, like if they really catch something good. But if things were, I know it sounds so positive, right? If things work out for the Bears, well, you really don't know who's on your schedule until you get there. So I feel like the Bears for this year's record are more betting on regression than anything else. Is that like from other teams? Would y'all agree with that?
Yeah, I mean,
Maybe
you're
not betting on,
banking-
hoping for.
Yeah, you would be essentially throwing up the Hail Mary, as it were, that Aaron Rodgers gets fed up Tom Brady, which, what is he going to be, 44 this year, right? 43, 44, something like that. Like,
He's 44 this year. Ageless wonder.
yeah, but that could fall off a cliff at any point. Like, I said that last year too. Like, he's the one dude I think that defies age to this point. But I mean, it's also betting on luck, which
Right.
bounce the ball here, a turnover from Eddie Jackson going to the house there, like, and all of a sudden you do have something with in game momentum and whatnot. And you're always good for one game. It feels like, of one random player doing something you don't expect them to do, and it gives you something that you didn't have before within the game itself. But on the surface, it's a tough look for this schedule.
Yeah. But I mean, I think we knew that. Is that silly to say? Like, I think we knew that since the schedule came out and we didn't even have the specific lineup of it. I think Brandon said it well. At the end of the day, the arrow is up because the Bears found a quarterback out of nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
There was a real world, guys, where we were going to watch Andy Dalton lead the embers that were the 2018 Bears against this schedule, and that was it. Like, we would be looking at Sam Howell and Spencer Rattler and talking about 2022 quarterbacks because the Bears might be carrying like a top 5 pick all the way to term, but we aren't. Instead, we got Fields. I think that's really great. Like, that I think is the duality, right, of this, where it's like, it's a great time to be a Bears fan. It's also a hard time because it's going to be a little bit. I remember we said this, back on like draft day, that like this would have been a season that if you could have gone into Madden and just simmed it and gotten to 2022, I think we all probably would, right? Like, that. Yeah. This is one of those where you go, oh, great. I actually have to live that year of my life. But like, when you look forward at the rest of this season, if the record isn't what you're excited about, we'll start with Brandon, then go to Danny. What are you watching for? What do you want to see, if not Fields and not wins? Not that you don't want to see wins, but that you don't expect to see wins.
But I would probably say the rest of the young guys. I'm a lot more optimistic about Darnell Mooney. I'm expecting another step from him. It seems like he has it all. As far as route running, as far as speed goes, I think he has pretty much everything except for size. I think he could truly take a massive step this year. We're not necessarily going to see it as far as production goes because I think Andy Dalton isn't necessarily going to be able to highlight his best talents the way Justin Fields will eventually be able to do that. I think Jalen Johnson's going to have a big season. I think this defensive line is a lot younger than what people think. Travis Gibson's pretty young. Mario Edwards is pretty young. Angelo Blackson is pretty young. Like, you're gonna be able to. Bilal Nichols is pretty young. We'll see if they extend him. I think as long as we focus on the young guys, like, this season is going to be good. But you have to look at it for what it is.
I completely agree with B's point of view, and I want to make it clear, just because I don't want my Darnell Mooney thoughts to be taken out of context. I think Darnell could be and should be very, very good, but it's like I've got fatigue of seeing the damn route against Jalen Ramsey, where everyone's like, he burned Jalen Ramsey, and it's like, that's literally not what happened. But we'll let you have it. It's fine. I think he's going to be very good, and I fully agree with what you said, Brandon, that his talents are more pronounced, as it were, when he gets Justin Fields, not Andy Dalton. Especially because Andy Dalton's worst quirk isn't that he doesn't throw deep very well. It's that it kind of got the thing I always made fun of Mitch for. It's why AJ Green put up such great numbers. It's when in doubt, where's your number one? Where's he at? A-Rob is going to get fed the ball, regardless. That's what's just going to happen. But other things I guess worth looking for are whenever Justin Fields gets in, because I'm so critical of his feel as a play caller. I think Matt Nagy does a great job in play design and understanding leverage as a defense and how to take advantage of scheming and getting guys open. When you get that quarterback, it's one thing to be a great play designer and great offensive mind. Is a whole other thing to understand how to call a game. And I think he sucks at it, frankly. If Matt Nagy, since he's got the reins back, whenever he gets his new toy in there, how he develops as a play caller, if he develops as a play caller. I'm interested to see how they deploy the running backs, actually, because they have a really interesting running back room, in my view, between Damian Williams, Khalil Herbert, and David Montgomery and Cohen, whatever he sees if he. But other than that, it's like outside of player development, the running back room, and maybe understanding who they're going to extend next, whether it be Roquan or Bilal Nichols or whoever. It really is just kind of a year of watch the kids. Maybe Kendall Valdor shocks us all. I know I'm on the same page as Brandon with that. I think Valdor's a nickel. I don't think he's an outside corner. I've watched him enough. Between college and last year, where I just don't think he is an outside guy. And that's okay. Nickels are starters at this point in time, in this day and age. So there's plenty to watch for. I just don't think the regime sees themselves as a team in development. They're trying to win, I think.
I feel like
which very well may expedite Fields coming in.
I feel like the most complicated part about just the regime versus what I know I'm watching is exactly what you just said, Danny. This isn't a new regime. This is a regime that knows that they've got to put at least some kind of result out there. I don't think, as safe as Nagy and Pace's job might be, as long as they maintain just a decent standard, aka like don't embarrass themselves, I think that the record may end up closer to that than they want. Like, I really do think that Nagy thinks that he can make this team a 9-8 team, a 10-7 team. But we'll see. I mean, hey, look, he would be proving us wrong to some degree because he's had 2 years to do that now and hasn't. What I'm looking for, honestly, guys, sure, there's the kids. Like, I want to see something from Kendall Vildor. I would love to see Borum get into the game, 10 weeks from now, maybe. Just, why not? Throw him in there. Jason Peters probably isn't going to make it through the whole season anyways. But when I look at this, what I really want to see is healthy offensive scheme. I don't expect much from the running game, so maybe this is too much to ask for anyways. But I want to see a passing game that looks like it's got some kind of direction. I want to see motion. I want to see formation shifts. I want to see the stuff that analytics are confirming helps your quarterbacks out. And we saw a lot of that, believe it or not. The Bears used motion 40% of the time, motion or a shift in the preseason. And that's not to say it helped out a ton. I mean, certainly they drew 2 more, what are they called? Illegal formation penalties, which has just been consistent. But at least it seems like the fabric of their scheme seems a little better laid than it has been in the past. Certainly it's not that same play action rollout with the tight end coming across and the receiver coming over the middle over and over again. But I want to see that, whatever that looks like. And we'll see. Obviously, I hope it works. Sure. I don't really care at this point whether Matt Nagy or Bill Lazor calls plays. I just want to see the Bears succeed on offense. And I want to see them do that through some kind of better scheme. And obviously, young players developing. But really, truly, the record means next to nothing to me. This team needs to compete in 2022, if not 2023 and beyond. But this season is about Justin Fields. It's about building an offense around Justin Fields. And it's about young players developing, if you ask me. I mean, as far as final thoughts go, Brandon, when it comes to the season's about to start, if you had a final thought, what are you thinking? I
would say, if you're a fan listening to this podcast, just try to have patience. Have patience with the coaching staff, this full regime. Have patience with this offensive line. Have patience with Andy Dalton, because it's going to be a long season. You got to look at the bright spots of this team. I think it was a great point when you talk about offensive scheme. What a lot of people don't talk about is that Nagy put in an entirely new scheme last year in a COVID offseason, and it was a little bit wonky because a lot of what they were running was very, very basic. And the thing is, when they switched to Foles right at the beginning of the season, they had to completely just throw that stuff in the garbage because he was unable to run it. He can't run the Y zone play action boot offense because he's not fast, he's not mobile enough. But the thing is, that's why they brought in Andy Dalton, is because while he's not great, he's mobile enough to run that scheme. So you're going to see that scheme no matter if Andy Dalton's in the game or Justin Fields, because you saw the same thing in preseason. That's exactly what you saw. You saw both of them running the same exact scheme. So like you're saying, as long as they continue to develop that scheme, I think that's a positive going into next year.
What about you, Danny? Final thoughts as the season kicks off.
Final thoughts. I mean, take the season for what it is. Don't really let the Bears ruin your Sundays anymore, because you kind of know what this season should be. But I watched the whole league and have since I was about 14 because I got tired of letting them ruin my Sundays. I agree with what B said to an extent, where it was a completely different offense. I also don't believe that's the offense he wants to run. That's just my belief. I think he wants to be – there's a reason Andy Reid has said time and time again that Matt Nagy's his best coaching protege because he's little Andy Reid. I think he's going to probably eventually come back to that offense he was trying to run week one in year two in the second year he had Trubisky. At some point. It might not be right away, but we'll see. Only time will tell, obviously. But enjoy the year. Watch for the development. Don't get your expectations too high. Don't go into Sunday thinking that, they're going to shock the world and start Fields and this, that, the other. If it happens, it happens. But football's back. Enjoy the game tomorrow. Maybe if you think you can control yourself, enjoy some FanDuel or DraftKings, whatever it might be.
Props.
Or Thrive
Bet some props.
Fantasy.
Yeah.
Thrive
Or
Fantasy.
Thrive Fantasy.
Thrive, THRIVE. Thrive Fantasy. WCG's got a promotion with them. You can use promo code Schmitz to match your first deposit. It's in there.
See, this is what our host does to us, guys. He doesn't let us in on things. He just he leads us and guides us to water and says drink, but doesn't tell us what's in the water. It's great. But yeah, I mean, I'm excited, man. Like you guys, football's my favorite sport. I grew up playing it. I coached it. I armchair analyze it like the two of you guys do. It's fun, and it's great that it's back, and we don't have to go without it till February next year.
Absolutely.
So,
I mean,
sit back, relax, and step down.
If I was going to give a final thought, it is to take a deep breath, which I don't say to sound condescending. It's that the Bears got Justin Fields, and as silly as that sounds, whether he plays this year or not, that means that the arrow is massively pointing in the up direction, almost no matter what happens this year. The Bears have Justin Fields under 4 years of rookie control, so it doesn't have to be now. And if we go all the way back to when Mitch Trubisky played, we can remember that a rookie who I remember when Mike Glennon was playing terribly, I was one of the many all over like the forums that was saying, we got to put Mitch Trubisky in. You should have seen his accuracy in college. Like, he's going to come in, he's going to play so much better than Mike Glennon. And he ended up throwing 7 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, and being a rookie overall. Like, there is plenty to love about Fields' game. And when he comes in, I think the Bears are going to be much more exciting to watch than they are with Andy Dalton. But at the end of the day, the Bears weren't maybe they were trying to win the Super Bowl, but they probably aren't going to this specific season. And I think that whatever happens this year, almost win, lose, or tie, can be a building block for next year and years beyond, so long as Fields plays well enough to develop. So We'll be with you every single step of the way, of course, but whether the Bears get embarrassed against Los Angeles or not starts to look a little bit easier to swallow when you remember that Andy Dalton is not the quarterback of the future. Justin Fields is. And whenever he comes in, we get to see what that future is going to look like. And I think it's going to be pretty bright. But anyways, guys, that was the podcast this specific Wednesday night. Be sure to check us out it should be Wednesday, record on Tuesday nights and then go live on Wednesday as far as the podcast recording, because we want to try to break down the film. But truth be told, Brandon, Danny, we're all going to have to see what happens when it comes to the All-22 situation on whether or not we're going to actually have anything to break down or whether we're just going to be talking about broadcast footage and clips and so on and so forth. But we'll see what happens. As far as things go from here, great stuff. Brandon, where can folks find you online?
Find me at BRobNFL. I'll have the props up every single week, all season long. I plan to produce a lot more content as far as football goes. We'll see if my All-22 plug comes through for me. But I'm excited for this season, guys.
Danny, how about yourself?
Am I allowed to plug my other Windy City Gridiron podcast
That's
thing?
the point of it. I mean, I would plug Brandon on work on Windy City if I could drag him there.
Yeah. So you can find me on the whole Twittering thing if you don't already. At Dan Meehan. My last name is spelled M as in Mary, EEHAN as in Nicholas. The numerals 90 after it. And also be on the lookout for, it might be every week. It probably is going to be more like every week, where Jacob and I kind of start digging into the 2022 draft class. Jacob Infante, you can follow him at Jacob Infante, and kind of recap some of the players that we followed pretty closely, because in the NCAA season last year, for previous draft class and this coming draft class. And congrats to our colleague Jacob, who just crossed the 11,000 follower mark on Twitter. I just
Congrats.
I hope to one day I hope to one day grow up and be like him.
Absolutely. Did I cut you off? Did you finish?
Oh no, I was gonna say, and off to you, Robert.
Perfect. And you can find me on Twitter at Robert K. Schmitz. That's RobertKSchmitz, right here on Run Pass Opinion, where I'll be doing as many breakdowns as I can, depending on, again, All-22 and whatever else I can pick out. But either way, it should be a fun season. Look, it really can't get any worse than it was in 2019 and 2020. And yes, I will invoke that voodoo while knocking on this wood right here, because those were rough seasons. So we'll be right here with you every step of the way. Bear down, and thanks so much for hanging out with us. And we're clear. Okay, so we've got all the recordings and whatnot. Good stuff. Yeah, I know, Adrian. I'm ready for it. But I know I've got about a couple minutes at least before I need to shut things down. So let's take some questions. Does that sound fun to you guys?
Let's do it.
I got a minute or two. Why not?
Man, Brandon, I'm so mad that betting's not legal in Texas, because there are so many of these prop bets that you are just smoking. And I'm like, I could make an actual income off of this thing if I
Robert,
just bet
I believe
B-Rob.
it's pronounced chaos.
No, it's not.
I'm surprised it's not legal in Texas yet, to be honest with you. That just doesn't make sense to me.
Texas is at the forefront of conservative policy, and we're not getting into that. But it's more to say that I think that they're going to be one of the last to get into legalizing gambling. But
that is very unfortunate.
But we're not getting into that. Anyways, as far as so obviously we talked all up Bears and whatnot. I think your Deonte Johnson thing's hilarious. Why does he keep getting underpropped? I mean, it feels like a guinea at this point.
Because he drops a lot of passes. That's why, especially on national television, he always drops passes. So
it's and it's also soft tissue cramp ups during the game, where his hamstring gets tight or his quad gets tight and he has to miss a series or two. Like, for some reason, he's just that guy where he'll get nicked, come back in a couple series and he's fine. Like, he just is nicked up.
Man,
I just enjoy.
I want people to talk about that as much as possible, just so we can keep hitting on these props.
Akusai, one thing that you mentioned, I have to say it because you're absolutely right. Like, It's wild to think that the 2019 and 2020 seasons were as bad as they were, and the Bears came out of them like 16-16 with a playoff loss. Like, the wins loss
Man.
part of it is.
So while we're kind of doing the ask the audience thing, God, I am seeing a lot of fire Nagy. Like, who's the replacement?
Devil or Joe Brady. Like, there are plenty of hot names out there. You ask enough Bears fans, you're gonna get a Jim Harbaugh. Like, if you want the names, they'll tell you.
Like, I'm all for Brian Dabble, but why would Brian Dabble come here? Like, does he want Justin Fields? But do you know he wants him?
I mean,
I would want him.
That's what I'm saying.
No, we all would. I was screaming to anyone that would listen to me that if Fields is in any other class, he's QB1, and we all overthought this thing. But
thank you,
Muhammad.
Thank you. That was really kind. Thanks for subscribing. Anyways, keep going, Denny. We got a little alert day.
It's just like one of those things. Like, there's just no right answer. Dabble's great. I mean, everybody thought Joe Brady was getting a job. I just think anyone can be a great play designer. Being a whiteboard warrior, as I'm gonna start terming them, I guess, is great. All these coaches in the NFL can get on a whiteboard and demonstrate. I think Matt Nagy as a coach, I'm left a lot to be desired as the play caller still. And I think Matt Nagy's got the part down that's harder in terms of his guys believe it. Like, and for better or for worse, and I think that's because he is a player at heart. He played the game. He went to the Arena League. He's done the thing where he's cut his teeth at every facet or at every corner of the game. And that endears him to his players. But it also, as you and I have talked off the record, Robert, I think it makes him a bit snarky in a sense, and a little bit of "I'll show you," like even spiteful. Going back to the a little bit spiteful towards the media, where he's, of course I know I need to run the ball. I'm not an idiot, so I'm going to run it 60 times this week, right up the middle. Like, you know what we mean, jerk.
Yeah,
but I just don't think the grass is always greener, because how many times. Like, this is even before me, but Dave Wanstead was the hottest coordinator in the NFL when the Bears hired him away from Dallas.
Well, do you remember, just to throw it out there, do you remember who the Bears, it was my favorite, again, Forum Lurker. You remember who the hot Forum Lurker, like, coach choice was when Nagy got hired? Brandon, do you remember?
DeFilippo.
It was DeFilippo.
DeFilippo.
The current quarterbacks coach. Like, hot names
and if you
only mean so much sometimes.
And Robert, if you remember, the two names I was between before I settled on Nagy was him and DeFilippo's offensive coordinator, Frank Reich, who's now in Indianapolis. And because everyone thought DeFilippo was the brains. It just goes to show we don't really know anything. It's all an educated guess.
Right. I mean, exactly.
My thing is, I don't necessarily dislike Nagy or Pace, but
that's what I'm saying.
I mean, with this rookie quarterback and with this roster, I think they really, really need to rebuild, and I can't see that happening because these guys are going to be fighting for their jobs every single season, which they should. But I think for the success of this team in 2023 and 2024. They need to rebuild in 2022, and that's not going to happen with these two guys. So I think the best for this team would be for them both to be fired, and I don't think that's because they can't do the job. I just think that's the position that they're currently in.
Yeah, I agree with you, B. I'm really weird about the changing of schemes. Like, we saw it with Cutler, where it was 5 and 6 years, or Jason Campbell when he was in Washington, where it was 4 and 4 seasons. You can't keep making these guys learn new offenses. It's just not fair to them. Like, could you make the argument that Jason Campbell was going to suck and play? Yeah, you could absolutely make that argument.
Campbell specifically. Is it Campbell I'm thinking of, or no? Who's the guy who got sent home with the blank CD for like the?
That was Jamarcus Russell.
That was Jamarcus. Yeah,
that was John DeFilippo who gave him that.
Gave him that disc. Yeah.
That's
one
of the best football stories I've ever heard, by the way. Hey, take a look at these. Let me know what you think.
I would say that it's more likely they're extended out 2 years to build it up again, versus get fired.
Yeah,
we'll see. If this team goes 4-13, we'll see.
Yeah,
and if they just don't play because Justin Herbert had an amazing season, right? And they had a decent record, and everybody on the Chargers was fired. So,
like everybody.
Yeah, that was weird, especially because they had just extended Lynn. That was like
you go 4-13 in the NFL, the owner fires you. I mean, look, it sounds so reductionist, right? That's like saying Thomas Graham's definitely going to stick on the roster because he's a draft pick, and he didn't. So they're like, you don't know with a lot of this. Yeah, go ahead.
I guess my PSA before I gotta go, like I gotta get ready to go to bed and stuff. But
Boo.
the PSA I have is to every Bear fan, draft Nick, everything in general. Like I know I contributed to the Daz Newsome hype by saying I liked him and I enjoyed his college film. Stop getting attached to late round picks. There's a reason they're getting picked in the 6th and 7th round.
Dan, we don't have high round picks to get attached to. We got to get attached to somebody.
I'll take it up with your Lord and Savior Ryan Pace.
Look, I think the worst part about Nagy, and hey, we'll see, right? I'm ready to see anything, guys. Is I feel like this team shouldn't have been 8-8 in 2019.
All right, guys. Not to cut you off, Robert. I got a jet.
I'll talk to Brandon. I got no problem with that.
All right, see you later, Dan.
And then Brandon, I don't think that the 2020 team should have been 8-8. Like Matt Nagy, it's not even like he has this way of pulling games out. He has this way of keeping the team in it. That like the most public part of his job, being an offensive guy, has been really abysmal. And yet the Bears found a way to win against the Los Angeles Rams in 2018 in a game where they won like friggin' 13 to something. Like they scored nothing, but they pulled a trick play out of their butts and scored just enough to win. Like, look, all I'm saying is that this is a pivotal season for Nagy. I think he probably needs at least 6 wins to stick around. That's not even that high a bar. You know what I mean? But like,
not at all.
If he embarrasses the organization, I think McCaskey may move in a different direction. But Nagy hasn't shown me, like, the team has gone through enough to have every reason to quit on him. Is that fair? Like, they had no reason to believe that they could figure a playoff spot out in 2020. They did, though. And they didn't even do it with a whole bunch of hard games. Like, am I really giving some massive credit to beating Jacksonville and Houston and so on and so forth? I'm not trying to. You know what I mean? It's just weird looking back at, like, the Tampa Bay win and the tight. I mean, Brandon, they were Roquan catching Drew Brees' interception away from upsetting a great New Orleans team in the middle of the season. Like, there's enough of these to sit me here and have me go, I don't think Nagy's terrible. Like, I think he might be a terrible play caller. Like, I'm willing to say it because I'm still learning about, like, play calling as I go. But I don't know. I just keep going back and wonder. Like, I keep comparing him to Tressman. I keep comparing him to John Fox and feeling like the team doesn't do what I would expect them to under a truly bad coach. But I don't know. Am I talking crazy? Am I just being too positive?
No, not necessarily. I mean, I think you're speaking for what it's worth. I think this. I don't know. I'm really interested to see where it goes once things go bad.
Yeah.
Like, say they go 0-3. Justin Fields comes in week 4. They win the game, right?
Brandon, let's start even hotter. What if it's like? What if, just spinning the yarn, right? What if the game's 48-14? Like, what if the Rams just annihilate the Bears? Like what?
I mean, I'm expecting that 31-13. That's that.
But like,
if you ask me what
like
the score
48. Like they really pour it on, right? Like they approach the 50-point threshold, right? Where like,
I don't think week 1 matters though. I think regardless, Dalton's going to start week 2. There's not going to be any because everyone expects them to lose by a lot. Like they're like, so I don't think it matters. Week 2.
Ooh.
They're playing the Bengals at home.
And the Bengals, you're saying if the
That's
Bengals
where thing
win,
gets. Yes.
That's
after
where,
the Bengals get embarrassed by the Vikings week 1. That's where things get tricky. Because if they lose the game against the Bengals, that's where a lot of pressure starts coming. And then they got the Browns the week after. They lose those first 3 games in embarrassing fashion because, right, they lose bad to the Rams and the Browns. And then they lose to the Bengals at all. You lose 3 straight embarrassing games. That's where Justin Fields comes in.
100%.
And then 2 games later, they run into Green Bay, the Bucks, the 49ers, the Steelers, the Ravens, all in a row.
I mean, that's
Say
such a
if
buzzsaw.
they're let's see, 1, 2, 3, 9, 10. If they're 1-9 after the Ravens, does Nagy keep his job? 1-9. 1-9. Does he keep his job?
If they are, there's no way, right? I mean, like
They're favored in 2 of those 10 games. They're favored in 2 of those 10 games.
like you're saying, I mean, if he comes out of that 4-6, it's a miracle. If he comes out 3-7, he's playing with house money at that point, right? Like, I mean, you bring up something, Brandon, that is really interesting. Where when it comes to the locker room dynamic specifically, I mean, you'd almost make the case that Cincinnati game's a must-win, just given who's on the schedule and when they have to play them. Like, you can't have Dalton not win one, and Cincinnati's the one to do it. Not just because of the, like, Dalton revenge storyline, the stuff we like to go crazy about, right? But just because they're not the Browns, right? The Browns, you know, I am going to be really interested to see what happens with the Browns, actually, now that I think about it, Brandon, because specifically that might be the Bears' defense's best matchup. I mean, like, what?
No.
No, please.
Oh, no.
Please, help me. Like, it's more just that's one of those few offenses in the NFL currently that still comes run first. You know what I mean? And that's probably where the Bears' defensive strength lies. I mean, I agree with you. I think Baker Mayfield in that passing game could still torch a very poor Bears secondary. I'm not trying to say they can't. It's more to say compare it to the 49ers' diverse, like, stretch run attack to go with, like, very deep play action passing game versus Green Bay's, like, we're going to throw until you stop bleeding, which is never. Like, all these different teams that would beat the Bears where it hurts just consistently. I feel like, I mean, they're going to lose to the Browns. They're going to I believe in that.
I think the Browns are the most complete team in football.
I am
honestly.
too. Honestly, Brandon, I'm such a believer in their defense. Like, I'm such a believer in their defense. Kevin Stefanski seems like I feel like Stefanski's that offensive mind that's, like, not being talked about enough. You know what I mean?
100%.
Where, like,
100%.
Stefanski did a great job with last year's offense, and we're still talking about McVay, Shanahan, and there's a third one. I'll think about it if I think about it, or, like, I'll get there if I think about it enough. But LaFleur, like, we're talking about those 3, and maybe Arthur Smith creeps into the conversation. But
Arthur Smith is definitely the guy they talk about.
Like, Stefanski.
That's all we hear.
But
good luck with Atlanta with that terrible offensive line. Oof. I cannot wait. We'll see if they're still talking about him after this season.
Mm-hmm.
Because that defense is horrid. That offensive line is horrid.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think personally, like you're saying, Atlanta is that team, not to totally pivot on you, Brandon, that I find myself saying, like, Atlanta might regret the Fields thing the most. Like, whether it's Fields specifically or Fields versus maybe not doing enough out of the 4 spot, I just don't see Kyle Pitts as, like, the guy that's going to keep their team from imploding overall. You know what I mean? But maybe they're just playing with house money and know that they're going to lose a lot eventually.
Kyle Pitts could be a Hall of Famer, and it could still be a bad pick. Like, Kyle Pitts could be a Hall of Famer and Justin Fields be really good but not Hall of Famer, and it was still a terrible pick.
Well, so Akusai said not Denver, and I agree with you. The trouble is that I feel like the higher you get up the chain, the more instant regret there is. You know what I mean, B? Where it's like, if the Falcons implode and Denver doesn't win a Super Bowl, the Falcons still like had the first shot at him. And so if they had taken him, Denver doesn't get the choice. But like, I can't help but feel like somebody mentioned Lance. You're talking to the wrong two people. Both of us love Lance. And he landed in like the ideal fit for him. Like Kyle Shanahan went, "That's my guy," and we went, "Yes, he is." Smart choice. But I mean, it's still a borderline miracle, if not an outright miracle. It's probably an outright miracle that Fields fell to the Bears. I mean, especially with reports coming out that like it may have truly been due to Fields' epileptic condition, which seemed to push Denver off of it. And that seems like a poor reason. I mean, I'm not downing on epilepsy and pretending like it's not a big deal, but if he's had it for 4 years and it hasn't come up before, then that might not be the reason that I would pick Patrick Surtain. But that
no one ever talks. On top of that, no one ever talks about how the Vikings also wanted Justin Fields.
Yep. I mean,
so what happens if they trade up in front? But what happens if they traded with the Giants?
Right.
How was this team feeling then?
Bad. I mean, fans were. What was wild to me, Brandon, is that I've watched the Bears fans stoke themselves up about something that was never going to happen a bunch, and in the last 3 years, holy crap, 2 of them happened: the Mac trade and Fields. Like, it's wild how many times what seemed to be like the big thing, and not to mention they actually took a shot at Russell Wilson. You know what I mean? Like, I think it was Bill Zimmerman who said this at one point, and I actually really liked this, that they said, you have to credit Nagy and Pace with something, and that's just the raw force of will they employed at trying to upgrade quarterback. Yeah, they caught a break, absolutely, but they were the right team to be ready for it. Or not the right team, but the right pair. Now, of course, Brandon, that brings up the question of what they're going to do next, because if they let Allen Robinson leave, I think they'll regret it for the rest of their lives. But, I mean...
There's no way he should leave the building, but I worry. Like, say this, like I'm talking about. Say Nagy and Pace get fired, they go 4-13.
Right.
Allen Robinson is not on this football team next year. I promise you. There's no way he's on this football team anymore, because that new general manager that comes in, he's not holding on to Allen Robinson anymore. He's just looking at his cap hit, seeing $22 million. He's like, yeah, I'm not paying that. I'm not paying him $22 million for one season and having him have all the leverage in the world. So I think that's when they're in trouble. You lose Allen Robinson for nothing. And, I mean, people are hoping for, like, Juju and overpaying Michael Gallup. Overpaying someone in free agency that isn't as good as Allen Robinson for what, $2 million less than what you would have paid Allen Robinson, that's a nightmare scenario.
Yep. And the worst part is, I don't think you can just walk out to free agency and find a second Allen Robinson. You know what I mean?
No. Those players don't make it to free agency.
No. And I mean, the ones that do are Kenny Galladay, and I think Galladay's a great player.
He's not Allen Robinson.
Not only is he not Allen Robinson, I'm not 100% sure he's like... Okay, so Brandon, if we classified number 1 wide receiver as you have to be one of the 16 best wide receivers in the league, which I think you'd agree is a very tall order, right? I don't think Galladay's in that group. And I don't think that's like
no. I don't think he's close.
Right. Like
I think he's good.
Good.
He's not a guy that I want as my number 1 receiver.
Right.
My number 1 receiver is getting open on third down constantly. Kenny Galladay is a get up and make big plays guy. Mm-hmm. That's not who I want as. Now, say the Bears would have signed him on with Allen Robinson, he would be
now you're talking.
an amazing number 2.
Because that's the thing.
He's not a guy I want as my number 1.
I mean, exactly like that, Brandon. I think the one thing that I'm most scared about before we actually get to the questions, because you guys have had some bangers in the chat, by the way. I've been watching. Like, Tevin Jenkins, Kevin White. There was one about GMs going through like 5 quarterbacks. There's another one I might have to scroll back up for, but feel free to keep them coming. Point is, getting back to it, I do feel like, Brandon, the scary part about this that I think maybe some Bears fans haven't like thought about is I think Darnell Mooney is that prototypical number 2. When you've got a number 1, especially a number 1 like Allen Robinson, that takes away like that draws the safety's eyes, right? That guy who's going to get that safety cheating towards Robinson, Darnell Mooney gets that much better. It's like an exponential multiplier, right? You get Darnell Mooney times, say, 1.5 of what you would expect from him. But you take Allen Robinson away, and I think you get like half of Darnell Mooney, which would be like 3 times less if you did the math the way that I'm doing it in my head, because Darnell Mooney is not a guy who's built to play with tons of bodies around him. Is that fair? Like, he needs that space to work, and you generate that space. Take Tyreek Hill. People forget that Tyreek Hill has a lot of that space because Travis Kelce draws so much attention in the middle of the field. So when Tyreek Hill runs a go route down the sidelines, the safety has to pick between, okay, am I going to honor the guy who's going to run 60 yards downfield, or am I going to honor the guy who's already open 15 yards down the field? And that question alone makes like that KC offense so dangerous. You know what I mean?
That's why they complement each other so well. It's because you can argue it both ways and still be right.
Yeah.
And what people do, and as we've talked about before, Allen Robinson can be that Travis Kelce type of guy.
100%.
That's how they use him already. Now Darnell Mooney's not going to be Tyreek Hill because he just doesn't have that talent, but he can be very, very good. And the thing that people don't talk about are the little things. Are the Darnell Mooney working with Allen Robinson during the offseason and learning from him. And there's no better guy to work with in the offseason than Allen Robinson, because that's why he's so good. He's the big guy that does everything right, and that's why he's always open.
Yep.
And if Darnell Mooney can learn from that and learn those aspects of Allen Robinson's game, and then you use that, you complement that with his speed, that's an amazing football player.
Yep. And then at that point,
we'll see that.
And then at that point, Brandon, you can go bargain shopping for your wide receiver 3. Obviously, you want to live in a world where you've got Tampa Bay's complement. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But Tampa Bay had to get all their stars to align to not be playing with. I'm trying to think of who was like a free agent quarterback at the time.
Well, if Antonio Brown didn't lose his mind on multiple different teams,
right,
then he wouldn't be on the Bucs for dirt cheap.
Well, it's so funny you talk about Brown specifically, because I was actually already making the assumption Scotty Miller was their wide receiver 3, like based on the way.
Or Tyler Johnson.
Exactly.
Like, or Darden. Their wide receiver.
Bunch of good players, man.
Wide receiver core is so deep.
Yep. And it's the sort of thing where, like, sure, Marquise Goodwin isn't. I don't think he's quite that level, but maybe part of that's just scheme and production, right? Like, I want to elevate Scotty Miller over, say, Marquise Goodwin, because Marquise Goodwin is more of like a fast guy that hasn't done anything in a little bit. And I feel like that is what happens on, bad teams, is that you end up with guys who get underrated because the guys in the healthy offense catch 250 extra yards just by nature of being there. Whereas in another team, somebody like Mark Mariani he's not going to do that. Now, to get to the questions that I know people ask, because you and I can talk about wide receivers, defensive backs, so on and so forth till the cows come home. Kevin White and Tevin Jenkins, do you think we're there yet? I don't think it's fair to be there yet, but I mean, we're trending in the wrong direction. You know what I mean?
I wouldn't say we're trending in that way. I wouldn't say, because Kevin White, I don't believe Kevin White failed because of his injuries. I think he failed because he just wasn't a great football player. Now, Tevin Jenkins could fail because of that as well.
So you're thinking,
but we just haven't seen that yet.
You're thinking that Kevin
He hasn't
White,
gotten a chance to fail yet.
You're thinking Kevin White may have actually gotten bailed out by his injuries to some degree because it made it look like an injury problem, maybe he just wasn't a very good receiver. I mean, hey, his preseason performances weren't ever great, you know?
Exactly. And it's just so early, and I mean, Nagy and Pace lie about everything.
Everything.
Lie about everything. So
if you asked them their favorite color, I wouldn't believe it. Like
exactly. So it doesn't matter what they say about Tevin Jenkins. I'm not gonna believe any of it, and that's fine because I completely understand the competitive edge. They can lie all they want. That's fine. I don't care. But I just have to be patient and wait for when he does play, and then see what happens and see how he looks once he does play.
I'll tell you.
But, I mean, you can definitely be concerned about his back. There's plenty of reasons to be.
I'll tell you the injury player that I'm worried about most, Brandon. I think there's a chance that the Bears may have.
Hold on. Let me guess.
Uh-huh.
I don't know who you're talking about. Let me think. Injury.
Put in your guesses, chat. Soak in this moment.
I mean, I would be. I want to say that you're thinking Eddie Goldman, but I mean, I'm being honest. I don't think he's that important to be fully worried about him. But I don't know who you're talking about.
It's Tariq Cohen. I think there's a chance.
Yes.
I think there's a chance Cohen may never be the same again. Like we're so far removed from this ACL. It's giving me major Cam Meredith vibes. And if Cam Meredith was a 6'1", like roughly was he 200 pounds? Like he's a big dude. The point is he was your standard big guy receiver. We're talking about a guy like 5'10" or smaller, probably a lot smaller than that, closer to like 5'8". And if he loses anything in that knee, like who is he? You know what I mean? Like,
well, here's the thing. He had ACL surgery, and then, at all accounts, it sounds like he had another surgery. So, what, did he re-tear his ACL? Like, that's on the table. People haven't talked about that, but that is 100% on the table. They would have gone about it exactly the way they had if he re-tore his ACL.
And he wouldn't have had to publish it, by the way. Like, I remember...
No, not at all.
I remember we heard Trey Burton had a back surgery, like, way after the fact. Like, we heard Trey Burton's out at camp, and then Nagy came on the mic and said, yeah, it's because he had surgery, like, a while ago. He's still nursing it. Like, if he retore... The fact that, like you're saying, week 4, right? So, from a whole calendar year has gone by. This is abnormal for a single ACL tear. Like, modern medicine...
It's way past that.
Way past due.
Way past that.
I would feel better.
I mean, in the second surgery means he either retore his ACL or because of the timeline they're repairing his meniscus. Because a lot of times what happens when you get ACL surgery, well, when you tear your ACL, is you mess up your meniscus, and so they would rather not repair your meniscus because that furthers the timeline of your ACL. But what a lot of times happens is they repair your ACL without repairing your meniscus, and then they got to go back in and repair your meniscus because your meniscus is messed up. Because usually you tear your meniscus when you tear your ACL. So it's like if they repaired his meniscus, that's definitely not a good thing, but that would make more sense as far as the timeline of him being out for 6 weeks. Because when you repair your meniscus, you're out like 4 to 6 months. Right. So if you got that during the offseason, the timeline would make sense, and I wouldn't be as worried. Now, if he retore his ACL again, I would be worried, but that's not something that we could know.
Nope. And
unless he doesn't play this season. If he doesn't play this season, I'm going to assume he tore his ACL again.
I'm currently of the guess, right? Because I can't do anything else, right? Like, I'm of the assumption he either retore his ACL or this first procedure is just going really badly. I mean, and now granted, look, there's a point where you ask questions about the Bears training staff. Like the Tevin Jenkins.
No, they asked him, did he have another surgery, and he avoided it, which means he had another surgery. If he didn't have another surgery, he would say, no, he didn't have another surgery. He probably had another surgery. So, I mean, not great.
Yeah.
Not great. And the one thing that worries me is that Ryan Pace said that he's day to day, but everybody knows he's out for 6 weeks.
No way.
So why would he go to those lengths to lie when everybody knows, unless it was something really, really bad?
Yeah.
That's the thing that worries me.
I'm worried, if only because I know I was hoping for a lot out of Cohen this season specifically. Like, Cohen seemed like this beautiful blend of a pass-catching running back and a potential slot option that you could play with really, really well. Like you could just hop back and forth between them and stress defenses out while putting guys, like, you could bring an extra linebacker onto the field to defend against Cohen in an RB set and then flex out to empty and actually threaten. Because I know there's a whole lot of situations.
He could be the Deebo Samuel of this Shanny offense.
Right.
That's what he could be.
But nope. Instead he's hurt. and
now they're going to try to fit Marquise Goodwin into that, and we'll see.
Or Damian Williams, who may be a little better, like, than Marquise Goodwin at that.
I don't think they would use him split out in the slot, and not with Montgomery on the field. I don't think they would have that confidence.
Yeah, you mean the fact that, like, Damian Williams would more spell Montgomery than he would. Yeah, I get what you mean.
I think Cohen would be able to be on the field at the same time as Montgomery, and I think that those would actually give them some matchups.
Mm-hmm.
That's the one thing that I like, besides the offensive line, besides Andy Dalton not being good. It's just they don't have a bunch of mismatches on the field. Yeah, Mooney is great. Yeah, Allen Robinson is great. You need another mismatch. This offensive line isn't a mismatch, right?
Nope.
So the run game is going to be a mismatch. Who's that other guy? I promise you it's not Cole Kmet. So it would be Tariq Cohen, but it's not because they don't have it. So who is it going to be?
So what I look at, somebody said Fields. I mean, I can't blame him.
It would be. Him being able to run the football, that is 100% a good argument.
And hey, just to throw the point out, right? One thing that I've heard for running backs, and I heard it for Cam, right, is conversation about, like, a player's hit limit or hit total, right? How many times have they been hit? And as helpful as it would be to this Bears offense, there has to be the question of, like, is it worth it for Fields to take 100 hits off carries that he could just postpone to next year? You know, like,
what are they getting? What are they getting from him, like, playing?
Good feelings and contracts.
Besides the excitement of seeing him make good plays, what are they getting? Now, what are they losing? They're losing those hits. They're losing the potential bad habits. There's just more that can go wrong than that can go right.
Right.
Now, if they're playing, like we've talked about before, if they're playing in the Super Bowl tomorrow, yes, play Justin Fields. If they somehow made the playoffs, 100% you have to play Justin Fields because you can never know what's going to happen in the playoffs.
Heck, there's a point.
But until they get to that situation, why the hell would they play him?
And to your point, Brandon, you know what? I actually think I finally figured out a decent way to phrase when I'm absolutely certain Matt Nagy's going to put Fields in. I think I've got it. Are you ready?
He's fired?
I was going to say, when Andy Dalton loses a game, Matt Nagy thinks they had to have. Like, whatever that is. Because Matt Nagy thinks they're going to make the playoffs, right? In fact, Matt Nagy, like, not only wants to, he's, like, betting they will. So, to your point, like, if Matt Nagy thinks Fields can rescue a playoff season out of 3-7, then, like, maybe that's when Fields goes in. But if Dalton is even, like, oh gosh, okay, so they play Rams, let's say it's a loss. Cincy, let's say it's a loss. The Browns, let's say it's a loss. Maybe now Fields is in because they need that Lions and they need that they need that Raiders win to get back to 2-3, even with the gauntlet incoming. Because to your point, Brandon, like, they want to make the playoffs, and at that point, that Lions game becomes the quote unquote Super Bowl. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, definitely. I mean, I could definitely see that scenario. I keep seeing people in the chat, and I keep seeing it on Twitter as well, and I don't understand it. People keep bringing up, how is the O-line going to be better next year? The Chiefs lost because of their O-line, right? That's why they lost the Super Bowl?
Yeah.
Can we all agree on that? Okay. Now their offensive line is good. Because the offseason, right? They were able to acquire players during the offseason.
And guys, well,
so that's
actually,
exactly what would happen.
They lost both tackles to free agency. Like, you're actually bringing up a stronger point than you may realize, because they don't even have the guys who came back from injury. Like, Schwartz retired and Fisher left, but they replaced him because that's what happens in an offseason. Yeah,
They traded for Orlando Brown, right?
Look,
They drafted a couple guys in the draft. That's what could happen. They could trade for a tackle, right? After Fetty leaves, they put Jenkins back at right tackle.
They got to get a center, I think, personally.
They sign a left tackle, or they leave Jenkins at left tackle. They sign a right tackle, whichever it is.
Center.
I don't care.
Centers are like known commodities, and they don't cost $1 billion. You know what I mean?
You draft those guys in the 3rd or 4th round. Though.
Yeah, and then you get
that's where my head is.
Like,
no, or you get Creed Humphrey, who is the Chiefs center.
I know.
That's their starting center. And they drafted him in, the 3rd or 4th round?
They're supposed to go there, but here we are.
Exactly. I think if Ryan Pace is still the GM, that's 100% what's going to happen. Because this team's going to fail because of the offensive line, and he's going to throw every single asset they have at the offensive line. He's going to trade into the 1st round from their 2nd round pick and draft a left tackle or right tackle, however they see Jenkins. And then they're going to, again, draft a guard or a center in the 3rd round.
I think that
I don't think it's a terrible plan.
I think it could be. I mean, it could definitely be a lot worse, right? Like, I personally think that. So it's Bryson. I'm seeing you saying that the offensive line might be in the 15 to 20 range. I mean, maybe if everybody else loses a player, but
this year,
like, yeah, like, unless you were talking about next year and I missed it. I personally think that when you're starting a left tackle that you pulled off a fishing boat not 3 weeks ago, and Jermaine Ifedi looks like maybe the worst lineman on the team, and what is it? Then you've got like Sam Mustipher, and I don't think Mustafer's phenomenal personally. Like, when you're running outside zone plays, he can get to his spot.
At best, he's a below average center.
Right. That's
at best, Jermaine Ifedi is a below average right tackle. Those are 2 below average players. At best, Jason Peters is an average tackle who's going to miss 5 to 6 games.
At best, James Daniels is average, and at best, Cody Whitehair's above. Like,
above average. Not making it with that. That is not a 15th. That's at best. That's not a 15th ranked offensive line. That's like a 25th ranked offensive line. At best.
But hey, that's what buying average players is for in free agency. But we'll see what happens. I mean, I know one thing that I'm a little curious about is how the Bears are going to actually navigate their cap, Brandon, because right now there is no hotter position than inside linebacker, which feels a little crazy to me, if I could be honest. Like, it is wild how much linebackers are getting paid, given the pay spike from, I think it's like, for crying out loud, what is his name? Eric Kendricks is making like $11 million. Like, he signed the biggest deal in linebacking, 4 or 5 years ago, and now Fred Warner's making 20. So,
well, it doesn't sound like Roquan, from a comment he made, it doesn't sound like he feels rushed to get his deal at all. It doesn't sound like he's feeling rushed at all. He's probably waiting for a couple more people to sign, and then he'll sign in like a year from now. Just fine. Because the thing is, what people don't talk about is they don't have the money to sign him right now.
No, they don't.
They don't have the money. So
it doesn't fit. Like, they've got to figure something out. Like, they've got to do.
I'm more interested to see what they do with Bilal Nichols and Akeem Hicks, because this line's deep, but to have both of them off the team next year, and Mario Edwards and Blackson, that would be their 2022 would be their last years of their deals. That's where you would run into some trouble. But I also don't think it's as easy as that, because I don't want necessarily to extend Akeem Hicks,
Mm.
and I don't know how much Bilal Nichols wants. So that's also hard because I don't think that they should be paying him very much because he doesn't rush the passer and he's
Nichols?
not amazing against the run. Yeah.
The scary thing about Nichols, I'm going to say something. You tell me what you think. Nichols is a phenomenal 5th-round pick, right? Let's start there. Like, phenomenal performance out of the 5th round. He, as far as how he plays, he is a
Pace is so good in the 5th round.
he is a very solid, if not outright good, 1-gap run defender. Don't ask him to 2-gap. He's not very good at it, but 1-gap he can handle. And he can rush the passer a little more than you think, but actually, I might tell you Mario Edwards has a little more juice against the pass than Bilal Nichols, because Mario Edwards is lightning. Like, Mario Edwards is very, very quick off the line. And I don't know. Like, I'm kind of with you that Bilal Nichols probably doesn't need a huge money extension. Like, I like
But he might want one.
Right.
Or be waiting to see what he could do this year. He might not want an extension right now because he might think in his head, no, I'm just going to have 8 to 12 sacks this year. He might be betting on himself, which he's more inclined to do.
Right.
But then what are they going to do if he does have 8 to 12 sacks? They wouldn't have the money to pay him. And they shouldn't pay him a bunch of money if he does do that. So they're in a tough spot because they have a very good D-line, but they could easily lose that D-line very quickly.
They could, but
Lose 4 guys. They could lose 4 guys in 2
Yep.
years.
They
And
absolutely
so
could.
that 2023 year, that's really important. They could be out those 4 guys.
Which, look, I almost feel like at this point, Brandon, we're gonna have to have the pacey attitude of like, we have to get to that question when we get to it because we're not even gonna know what the cap situation looks like until then. I mean, seriously, I feel like the dominoes start with Allen Robinson, right? Like, what the decision that they make surrounding Allen Robinson, who I can't help but think, Brandon, is going to be making his decision based on what he thinks of Justin Fields, right? Like, whether or not he wants to stick around and play with the kid versus go and just get the biggest deal that he can somewhere else is probably going to come down to, like, how he feels about it. But maybe he's already made his decision. Like, you never know.
I just think about it. It's just more about leveraging his leverage because he has no reason. He's getting $22 million guaranteed next year. That's what his franchise tag will be if they didn't sign an extension before then. So why would he not why would he take less than $22 million a year? Why would he?
Right.
And it's not like the Bears are going to be quick to sign him to a $22 million a year deal. So that's where they're in a tough spot.
Yep. All right. I think we've hit that point, Brandon, where we are 2 hours and 25 minutes into this, and we can probably shut it down about now. Like, I'm just suddenly starting to like realize like I could keep going, but I got a podcast to edit at this point.
Yeah.
But either ways, thanks so much, chat, for hanging around. I mean, you guys are great. Not only did we like have a nice little conversation here, but we got up to 50, 60 people watching at one point. So thanks so much. Please feel free to let us know like how we can both make the show better, but also make the live experience better. As far as when we go through trying to record this sort of thing, we want to keep going with this. Obviously, provide as much content as possible on the channel, and these kinds of live shows are a nice little way to just sort of do some instant stuff. So seriously, thanks so much. I'll be right back with you guys on Sunday night with Sunday night after Aaron Donald and the whole game. So either way, thanks so much. Have a great one,
Thanks, guys. Feedback is appreciated.
Seriously. Thank you.